1. Let me tell you about this interesting 1985 Chevy K10 I found on Craigslist for $9,750. I've got to be straight with you. There's some mixed messaging here that we need to unpack. The seller lists it as like new condition. But let's be real, the description tells a different story. This K10 is more of a project truck that needs some TLC. It's rocking a 383 V8 engine, which is actually a popular upgrade from the original. And it's got a fresh transmission, which is definitely a plus. Being an Arizona truck means we're probably looking at a solid foundation with minimal rust issues, which is huge for these old squares. The good news? It runs and drives, has power windows and locks, and comes with a clean title. Plus, it's a desirable short bed configuration. But here's the honest truth. It needs bodywork and carburetor attention. When a seller mentions needs little work, we all know that usually means there's some elbow grease required. At $9,750, you're not buying a turnkey truck, you're buying potential. These K10s are becoming increasingly popular among enthusiasts. And if you're handy with tools and don't mind spending some weekends wrenching, this could be a solid starting point. The bones seem good, being an Arizona truck with no rust, but go in knowing you'll need to invest more time and money to get it where you want it. 2. Let's talk about this 1979 Ford F-250 Ranger that's popped up on Craigslist for $2,300. I've got to be completely honest with you, this one's definitely seen better days. Look, the seller is being pretty upfront about the truck's condition, and we've got to respect that honesty. This F-250 is limping along with some serious issues. The transmission is basically running on 2 gears out of 3, first and second only, with third gear slipping, and there's a leaking radiator that needs replacement. The odometer's broken at 160,000 miles, and it's already rolled over once, so we're looking at some serious mileage here. On the slightly brighter side, they've recently replaced the fuel pump and water pump, so that's something. The truck does run and drive, albeit with limited gears, and it comes with a clean title. The Ranger trim was pretty nice for its time, but don't expect any beauty pageant wins with this brown workhorse. At $2,300, you're basically buying a project truck that needs immediate attention to the transmission and cooling system. This is the kind of truck you'd buy if you're handy with wrenches, have access to a good transmission shop, or are looking for a vintage F-250 to restore on a tight budget. These old Fords are tough as nails, but this one needs some serious love to get back to its former glory. 3. Let me tell you about this interesting 1974 Ford F-350 I found on Craigslist for $3,500. I've got to say, this one's got some appealing aspects that might catch your attention. What we're looking at here is a piece of American truck history with some solid fundamentals. The biggest highlight is that remanufactured 460 big block engine with only 17,000 miles on it. That's a serious power plant and a major plus point. It's paired with a 4-speed manual transmission, which is a robust and desirable combination for these old workhorses. The seller's being straightforward about the truck's condition. It runs, drives, and stops. 3 essential things you want to hear. They've recently added a new carburetor and fuel pump, which suggests some maintenance has been done. Having documentation from the original owners and a folder full of receipts is actually pretty rare for a truck this age and adds some real value to the package. Now, let's be honest about what you're getting into. The truck will need new tires, so factor that into your budget. At 84,000 miles on the odometer, it's actually relatively low mileage for a Choice 74. But remember, these are 49-year-old miles we're talking about. For $3,500, you're getting a classic F350 with a fresh heart transplant and documented history. That's pretty interesting for someone looking for an old-school work truck or restoration project. Just keep in mind that any vehicle from 1974 will need regular attention and maintenance, regardless of condition. 4. Let's talk about this 1975 Ford F350 that's up for grabs at $3,500. I really appreciate when sellers break things down into the good, the bad, and the ugly. It shows honesty and helps us get a clear picture. This F350 is packing the classic 360 FE V8 engine, which is a solid power plant from Ford's golden era. The 4-speed manual with the granny gear is a fantastic setup for these old workhorses. It's basically bulletproof when maintained properly. One of the biggest wins here is the minimal rust situation, which is often the death sentence for these old trucks. Now, let's be real about what you're getting into. The seller's being upfront about the issues. You've got oil leaks, pretty common for these old-timers, spongy brakes that need attention, and some small dents in the body. The odometer shows 23,000 miles, but has definitely rolled over, so the true mileage is anyone's guess. On the positive side, it's got some great features. The interior is reportedly in nice shape, it drives straight with tight steering, which is impressive for a truck this age, and it's still wearing its original Wimbledon white color. The gooseneck hitch and stake pockets make it a potentially useful work truck too. For $3,500, you're looking at a fairly honest old truck that needs some TLC but isn't a basket case. It's a good starting point for either a restoration project or just a classic work truck that you can fix up as you go. These F350s are getting harder to find in restorable condition, and having one with minimal rust is a big plus. 5. Let's talk about this 1970 Ford F100 that's listed for $7,000. I've got to say, this one's interesting because it's had quite a bit of recent work done to it. Let's be straight here. This is a 53-year-old truck with an odometer that's rolled over, so that 33,000 showing isn't telling the whole story. But what's really catching my attention is the list of recent repairs and replacements. The seller has addressed a lot of important mechanical items: new U-joints, a complete brake system overhaul, master cylinder, soft lines, rebuilt carburetor, and a new intake manifold. They've even tackled some typical old truck issues like floor pans and the dash wiring circuit. The heart of this F100 is the 302 V8, which is a solid, reliable engine that Ford used for years. According to the seller, it runs and drives well, which is promising given all the recent maintenance. The manual transmission in these old Fords is typically pretty robust too. At $7,000, you're not buying a show truck. The fair condition rating tells us that. But you are getting a classic F100 that's had a lot of the typical old truck headaches already addressed. The yellow paint might not be everyone's cup of tea, but these trucks have a great following, and parts are readily available. 6. Let me tell you about this absolutely killer 1965 Ford Ranchero that's up for grabs at $19,000. This isn't your average classic car-truck hybrid. This one's been seriously upgraded while maintaining its classic charm. Let's dive into what makes this Ranchero special. Being an Arizona car is already a huge plus. We're talking about a rust-free body with solid floor pans and transmission tunnel, which is like striking gold for these classics. The fresh 289 V8 is paired with a newly rebuilt C4 automatic transmission with a TCI shifter, which is a fantastic combination for both reliability and performance. The upgrades list is seriously impressive. TCI tubular front arms, rack and pinion steering, front disc brakes, and rear traction bars. Basically, this Ranchero has been modernized where it counts. The powertrain got some love too, with a new 4-barrel carb, aluminum high-rise intake, and headers with dual exhaust. That means it's not just pretty, it's got some real muscle to back up those looks. At $19,000, you're getting a turnkey classic that's been thoughtfully upgraded. This isn't some hastily thrown-together project. It's a well-executed build that combines classic style with modern drivability. The seller's description suggests everything works as it should. It's quick and drives great. 7. Let me tell you about this intriguing 1955 GMC K20 that's listed for $15,000. This is definitely not your typical due 55 GMC. And I've got to be straight with you about what we're looking at here. What we have is essentially a custom build based on a military truck frame, which is pretty interesting. The seller's kept it brief, but the key points are that it's running a rebuilt 350 engine paired with a rebuilt 350 transmission. That's a classic and reliable Chevy powertrain combination that you can't really go wrong with. With only 400 miles since the build, these components are basically still in their break-in period. Now, here's where we need to think carefully. This is a military truck conversion, which means it's probably pretty robust, but it might also be a bit rough around the edges compared to a standard restoration. The seller rates it in good condition, and it's got 4WD, which is a nice feature for a vintage truck. At $15,000, you're buying something unique. Part classic GMC, part military truck with modern-ish running gear. This could be perfect for someone who wants a distinctive vintage truck with more reliable mechanics. However, potential buyers should definitely inspect the build quality in person and maybe bring along someone who knows these conversions. 8. Let's talk about this interesting 1955 Ford F100 that's listed for $25,000. This is definitely not your standard F100, and I need to be upfront about what we're looking at here. First, the good stuff. We're looking at a custom-built F100 with a pretty striking two-tone paint job in Corvette/Cadillac red and off-white. The real heart of this build is a near-new Pontiac 400 engine, pushing out 370 GP. That's some serious muscle for an old Ford. The seller mentions there's no rust, which is huge for a truck of this age, and the gas tank is in excellent condition. Now here's where it gets interesting, and you need to know this. The truck is currently in a partially disassembled state. The previous owner passed away while replacing the dash, so there's some interior work that needs to be completed. All the parts are reportedly there and in perfect condition, including chrome pieces, but you'll need to put it all back together. They've added some modern conveniences like seatbelts and a radio, and it comes with new interior parts. The odometer shows 0 due to the engine swap, so actual mileage is unknown. The battery is being maintained on a trickle charger, which suggests it hasn't been driven recently. At $25,000 OBO, you're buying a custom F100 that needs some final assembly. This isn't a turnkey classic, it's more of a nearly finished project with some high-end components. The Pontiac 400 is a great engine choice, and if all the parts are truly there and in perfect condition as stated, this could be a really cool truck once completed. 9. Let me tell you about this sweet 1957 Ford F100 that's up for grabs at $11,500. I've got to say, this one's got some interesting features that make it stand out. Let's start with the heart of this truck. It's running the 223 straight-six, but this isn't your average grocery getter setup. It's got some nice upgrades with a Clifford manifold, 2-barrel carb, and split headers running to dual glass pack mufflers. That combination should give this inline six a nice little bump in power and a sweet sound to boot. The body style is the desirable short-wide configuration with the big back window, which is a sought-after feature among F100 enthusiasts. The seller's being honest about the rust issues. There's some under the steps and at the bottom of the passenger door rocker, but they're claiming it's not severe. That's pretty typical for these old trucks, and at least they're upfront about it. Some recent work includes new tires and wheels, and it comes with a bonus: a brand new wiring harness in the box, which is a valuable addition as electrical issues are common in these old trucks. The interior is described as nice, and all the glass is in good shape, which is always a plus. The grille and front bumper are in nice condition too, which is important because these parts can be expensive to replace. At $11,500, you're getting a running and driving classic truck with some tasteful modifications and mostly manageable issues. The paint apparently needs a good wax but should clean up nicely. Having a clean Oregon title is another plus. 10. Let me tell you about this really special 1975 Chevy K20 that's listed for $8,000. And I mean special not just because of its specs, but because of its amazing family history. This K20 has a beautiful story behind it. It's been a one-family truck, used for hunting and woodcutting in North Idaho, and was cherished by the same family for over 3 decades. The original owner's wife kept it garaged and used it occasionally for yard work until she passed away at 100 years old. That kind of history and care is rare to find. Mechanically, we're looking at a 350 V8 that's reportedly still running strong, purrs, according to the seller. It's got some neat features, like a period-correct cruise control that the original owner installed himself, and it apparently drives incredibly smooth. The seller even says it handles better than their modern F250 diesel. Now, let's be honest about the condition. Being a North Idaho truck, there is some rust present. The seller's upfront about this, which is appreciated. But the fact that it's been garage kept for many years is a huge plus for a truck of this age. At $8,000, though the seller mentions this price is negotiable, you're getting a well-maintained piece of American truck history with a great story. The smooth-running 350 working cruise control and one-family ownership make this pretty interesting. Plus, these square-body Chevys are becoming increasingly popular among collectors and enthusiasts. 11. Let me tell you about this interesting 1979 GMC Caballero that's up for grabs for $4,950. If you're not familiar, the Caballero is GMC's version of the El Camino, and they're getting harder to find these days. What makes this one particularly intriguing is its factory V8 with a 4-speed manual transmission combo. That's a desirable drivetrain setup for these car-based pickups. The seller reports it runs, drives, shifts, and stops great, which is a solid starting point. They've done some recent work including a new intake and carburetor, and they've got documentation of all the work performed, which is always reassuring. Let's be honest about the condition though. This is described as a good running and driving project, which tells us it needs some attention. The body is pretty straight, with minimal rust by the back window, a common issue spot on these, but the interior needs work. While the power windows and door locks are present, some of the gauges and the fan aren't working, though the gas gauge does function. The lights all work, which is a plus. The factory air conditioning is a nice feature to have, even if it might need attention. The wheels and tires are reported to be in good condition, which saves you from an immediate expense there. At $4,950, you're getting a running and driving Caballero that needs some cosmetic attention and electrical sorting. These vehicles are becoming more collectible, and finding one with a manual transmission is pretty cool. The documented maintenance history adds value as you know what you're getting into. 12. Let me tell you about this 1972 Chevy C10 that's listed for $7,500. I've got to say, the seller's being pretty minimal with the description, so let's break down what we know. This is a long bed C10 running the classic 350/350ths combination, engine and transmission. A reliable and easily serviceable powertrain that's been a favorite for decades. The seller states it runs and drives, which is good, but they're not giving us much detail about how well it runs or what condition the mechanicals are in. They mention it has good interior and it's sitting on 22-inch wheels, which is a modern touch that's popular with these trucks. The odometer has rolled over, so the actual mileage is unknown, pretty common for a 51-year-old truck. At $7,500 OBO, or partial trade, you're in the market for what appears to be a driver-quality C10. These trucks have been climbing in value, but without more details about the body condition, paint, mechanical health, or any recent work done, it's hard to make a complete assessment of the value. If you're interested in this one, you'll definitely want to see it in person and ask some key questions. How's the body rust situation? Has any recent mechanical work been done? How's the transmission shifting? These are crucial points that aren't addressed in the brief description. 13. Let me tell you about this absolutely stunning 1977 Chevy C10 that's listed for $27,500. This isn't your average square body. This is something really special. What we're looking at here is a legitimate survivor with just 67,650 documented miles, complete with service records. Being originally from Oregon and showing no rust is huge for these trucks. The fact that it's only had 3 careful owners really shows in its preservation. Under the hood, you've got the tried and true 350 V8 with a 4-barrel carb, backed by the bulletproof TH400 automatic transmission. They've added a Flowmaster dual exhaust system, which probably gives it a nice rumble. But what's really interesting is this is a heavy-duty model with upgraded chassis components, better cooling, both engine and transmission, and disc brakes. These were expensive options when new. The authenticity factor is strong here. It comes with the original AM radio, owner's manual, and even the build sheet, which is rare to find these days. While it has been repainted in its original colors, that's pretty common for a 46-year-old vehicle. Currently sitting on rally wheels with BF Goodrich radials, but the original wheels, hubcaps, and tires come with it. That's a nice touch for collectors. At $27,500, yes, it's at the higher end of the C10 market, but this isn't your typical modified or restored truck. This is a documented, low-mileage, heavy-duty, optioned survivor with history. These original, well-preserved examples are getting incredibly hard to find, especially with documentation and original parts included. 14. Let me be completely straight with you about this 1979 Ford F-250 that's listed for $1,700. We need to address some important issues right off the bat. First, the elephant in the room. This truck has a lost title. That's a significant red flag and could be a major headache, depending on your state's requirements for getting a replacement. Title issues can turn into bureaucratic nightmares, so keep that in mind. Now, onto the truck itself. It's powered by a 351 V8, paired with a 4-speed manual transmission, and the seller says the engine runs great. However, let's be honest about the clutch situation. It needs replacement. While it's technically drivable, the seller themselves don't recommend driving it this way, which tells you how urgent that repair is. The body condition is described as fairly decent with minimal rust, mainly concentrated in the bed area near the cab. That's actually not terrible for a truck of this age, as these old Fords often have much worse rust issues. At $1,700, you're looking at a project truck that needs immediate attention to the clutch and has title complications to sort out. The seller is even willing to part out the engine and transmission, which suggests they understand some buyers might just want it for parts. 15. Let me tell you about this 1966 International 4X4 that's up for grabs for $1,000. I've got to be straight with you. This is definitely a project truck, but it might be interesting for the right person. Let's start with the reality check. This truck has some significant issues. The V304 engine runs, but it's running rough, which could mean anything from minor tuning needs to more serious problems. There's a rusted-out driver's side floorboard, hello Flintstones, and the driver's door doesn't latch. Both pretty significant safety concerns that need addressing. However, there are some interesting aspects here. The flatbed setup is pretty substantial at 7 wide by 9 long, with stake pockets and a 4 headboard. That's a lot of useful cargo space. Being a 4X4 International from '66 makes it a pretty unique piece of American truck history. And these old Internationals have a reputation for being tough workhorses. The fact that it's been with the same owner since 1980 is interesting, and it comes with the original operator's manual, which is a nice bonus for authenticity. The odometer shows 74,302 miles, though on a truck this old, that number might have rolled over. At $1,000, you're buying a project that needs immediate attention to safety issues like the floor and door. But for someone who loves old International trucks or needs a unique project parts truck, this could be worth looking at. These aren't your everyday classic trucks, and parts can be harder to find than for more common brands. 16. Let me tell you about this 1980 Chevy Silverado C10 that's listed for $27,000. I've got to say, the seller's description is pretty sparse for a truck commanding this kind of price. What we do know is that it's reportedly in very good condition with no rust and a straight body, both significant positives for a 43-year-old truck. The paint is described as very good but not show quality, which is at least an honest assessment. It's got 54,000 miles on it, though as with any vehicle this age, you'll want to verify if that's original. The seller mentions lots of upgrades, but frustratingly doesn't list what they are. At $27,000, that's information we really should have. For context, this is premium pricing for a 1980 C10, putting it in the territory of well-restored or highly modified examples. While these square-body Chevys are definitely climbing in value and becoming more collectible, this price point demands a lot more detail about what you're getting. What engine is it running? What are these upgrades? Has it been restored? These are all questions that need answers at this price level. If you're interested in this truck, you'll definitely want to see it in person and get a complete list of those upgrades and any restoration work that's been done. The seller seems open to reasonable negotiation, which might be worth exploring given the limited information provided. 17. Let me tell you about this interesting 1963 Ford F100 that's listed for $8,000. This isn't your typical F100 setup, and there are some details worth noting. First, let's talk about what makes this truck unique. It's sitting on a 1-ton frame, which is an interesting upgrade that gives it more carrying capacity than a standard F100. It's running the original style setup with an inline-6 engine and a 4-speed manual transmission. And the seller says it's their daily driver, which is always good to hear. It means the truck is actually running and reliable enough for regular use. They've just done a tune-up, and it's riding on brand new tires and wheels, so that's some recent maintenance taken care of. The paint is described as mostly original, which on a 60-year-old truck usually means it's got some patina and character. Now, let's be honest about what needs attention. The seller's up front about the truck needing some TLC. Specifically, needs a windshield wiper switch. Door seals need replacement. Window felt needs replacing. There's some rust in the driver's side floor pan at $8,000 OBO. You're getting a running and driving piece of Ford history that's been modified with that one-ton frame. The needed repairs are all relatively straightforward fixes that aren't uncommon for these old trucks. The fact that it's being used as a daily driver suggests it's mechanically sound, despite needing those minor fixes. 18. Let me tell you about this 1973 Ford F250 Camper Special that's listed for $9,000. This one's got some interesting features that make it worth talking about. First off, this is a Camper Special model, which means it came from the factory with heavy-duty suspension components and other upgrades designed specifically for carrying slide-in campers. These are becoming increasingly desirable among vintage truck enthusiasts. The seller reports it's powered by a V8, though they don't specify which one, paired with a 4-speed manual transmission. That's a robust and desirable powertrain combination. With 76,000 miles showing, it's got relatively low mileage for a nearly 50-year-old work truck. Though, as always with older vehicles, verify if those are original miles. What's particularly interesting is that it's described as all original and unmolested, in very good condition for the age. Finding an unmodified example of these old Fords is getting harder, as many have been heavily modified or customized over the years. The fact that it runs excellent suggests it's been maintained well enough to be a usable classic. At $9,000, you're in the market for what appears to be a well-preserved example of a desirable F250 variant. The Camper Special package and original condition add value, especially if you're looking for something that could either be preserved as is or used as a solid foundation for a restoration. 19. Let me tell you about this seriously impressive 1971 Chevy C10 that's listed for $9,000. And I've got to say, this price seems surprisingly reasonable for what's being offered here. This isn't just some old truck. We're looking at a ground-up restoration with a laundry list of new components and smart upgrades. The heart of this build is a 350 crate engine with only 1,300 miles on it, paired with a rebuilt 3-speed automatic transmission. The seller mentions it's got great power, both in the low end and at highway speeds, which is exactly what you want. The attention to detail here is impressive. They've upgraded to a modern analog digital instrument cluster while maintaining the classic look. The AC has been completely redone with a modern system, and they've even installed a Bluetooth radio that looks like the original. That's the kind of thoughtful modernization that adds value. The suspension got some love with new Bilstein shocks, and the differential has been serviced. The exhaust setup with Flowmaster Duals should give it a nice muscle car rumble without being obnoxious. They've even included practical upgrades like a spray-in bed liner. What's really nice is that they've kept some original parts. The stock wheels and hubcaps come with the truck, even though it's running new rims and tires now. The interior is completely redone with new seat, headliner, carpet, and dash, plus all new rubber gaskets for the doors and windows. 20. Let me tell you about this 1968 Chevy C10 that's listed for $18,750. I've got to be honest, the seller's description is incredibly brief for a truck commanding this kind of price. What we do know is that it's running the classic combination of a 350 V8 engine paired with a turbo 350 automatic transmission, a reliable and popular powertrain setup that's easy to maintain and modify. The seller states it drives and stops good, and emphasizes that there's no rust, which is significant for a 55-year-old truck. However, at $18,750, the lack of detailed information is a bit concerning. We're not told anything about the condition of the interior, whether it's been restored or modified, the paint condition, any recent maintenance or upgrades, the status of major systems like electrical, cooling, or brakes. The odometer shows 100,500 miles, but with no context about whether these are original miles or if it's rolled over. While 68 C10S are definitely desirable classics and clean, rust-free examples can command good money, you'd really want a lot more information to justify this price point. These trucks have been climbing in value, but $18,750 puts this in the territory of well-documented, nicely restored examples.